Hey guys, so it's been a very nostalgic couple of weeks for me. Krista from Books and Jams and Sarah from Sarah's Bookshelf are hosting the Lord of the Readalong right now, and for me, that was like super exciting news. I believe it was my cousin Naomi who told me. It was like, okay, I think I'm going to participate in my first read-along. I don't do them very often just because I have a very sporadic reading style, but I really wanted to do this one because I've been meaning to reread these books for years. And I thought this would be good motivation. Also, it's fun being able to read it and talk to other people about it. So thank you two for hosting this. That's really exciting. Oh, and I'll link both of their announcement videos down below, so if you want to see what's going on, they'll be there. Now this month we were reading The Hobbit, which I just finished earlier today actually. I was listening to the audio version by Rob Inglis, and yeah, he's really good. His voice actually reminds me a bit of J.R.R. Tolkien's voice. I was able to hear a recording of Tolkien's voice a couple of years ago, and it sounds actually like, not like Rob Inglis' voice, but they're quite similar in terms of their speech patterns, I guess the quality of the voice. I've noticed for some reason it really reminded me, which made me happy, of course. The first thing I want to talk about is the title character, Bilbo Baggins. Now, I did do a video where I talked about why I loved him when I first started this channel. I will link that video down below as well, but it was one of the first ones I made. The lighting quality is absolutely horrific, and I see no point in not reiterating a lot of it anyway. So, yeah, Bilbo is just as fabulous as I remember him being. He's this odd cross between super heroic and just super normal, and I love it. Because when we first meet him, he really does not want to go on an adventure. It's just everything in his Baggins side is telling him not to. I'll get more into the Baggins too thing in a little bit. But he finally does go through various circumstances that are kind of only partly in his control. Thank you, Gandalf, who I will also discuss later. But once he goes on this journey, he discovers he's really good at it. It takes a while for him to kind of figure out how he fits into this, because he's not a stereotypical adventure hero. He doesn't know how to fight when this starts. He isn't someone who has like a tragic backstory and massive goals, and he doesn't want power or glory. He just wants to experience life, basically, and he wants to help his friends. We see at basically every place where they stop, or at least every place that isn't terrifying, he really shows this love of just soaking it all in. Being in the last homely house, he loves seeing the elves and all that, and all the people there. When he's at Beorn's house, he really loves seeing all of the animals, and in the spring the flowers, and it's just beautiful. There are moments when he this doesn't work as well because he's also acutely aware of their situation, such as when they're in Lake Town. But you can tell he really wants to stop and smell the flowers with a lot of this stuff. He also just doesn't want to be there most of the time. We do hear him talking a lot about, oh, why did I leave my hobbit hole? Poor guy. This becomes especially jarring when you contrast him with the dwarves, who are on this quest specifically because they have a goal. They want their home back and they want revenge, both of which fit very much into archetypal motivations for adventure stories of this type, making them very good foils for Bilbo, in particular Thorin. Thorin is about as different from Bilbo as you can be in a lot of ways. Bilbo is, at least at first, very timid, whereas Thorin is a lot more assertive. Thorin has this huge sense of pride and dignity, to the point where it's almost an ego. There's nothing wrong with with being proud of who you are and where you're from. That's actually good. But I think Thorin takes it a bit too far at times. He's very self-important, kind of pompous, very long-winded. Bilbo's kind of the opposite, at least when we meet him in this book. He can talk, but when he does talk, it tends to be a lot more short, I guess, or he'll give like short poetic speeches rather than just giving a massive, eloquent-ish, flowery speech about what they need to do now. And this leads to one of my favorite moments in the entire book, which is near the end, when Bilbo is about to go into the mountain for the first time, and Thorin starts to give this really flowery speech about, you know, then now it's time for Bilbo to earn his reward, and Bilbo just kind of like, Thorin, stop. Like, just, no, don't, stop. And of course by this point Bilbo had already saved the dwarves' lives I think 3 times, maybe 4. It's a few times. He'd saved their lives a few times. So, yeah, Thorin saying it's time for him to earn his reward is like, that's kind of slimy. But to be fair, they'd also saved his life, so they probably, yeah, it's not like Thorin was just going, you haven't done anything and we've done everything, so now you have to, like, But yeah, it still is like, Thorin, think through your words, please. Another character in this book that I really love is Gandalf. Oh my goodness. Gandalf is such a troll in this book, and I understand the irony of using that word, but it's not intentional, I promise. The way he interacts with Bilbo, especially in their first couple of meetings, is just hysterical, and I feel so bad for Bilbo. Like, the first time they meet, one of the first things he says is, I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure, and you can tell he's just kind of going, like, poke, maybe this person? And Bilbo's just kind of like, no, not me. Goes inside and Gandalf is just like, nope, I pick you. Now I'm thinking of Pokemon, I choose you. Now I'm picturing Bilbo as a Pokemon, and it's like, oh my goodness. Anyway, and Gandalf kind of continues with that throughout the entire book. You can see that he just he does legitimately mean very well, but he can be a bit playfully mischievous at times. I think he enjoys watching Bilbo scramble a little bit in that first section. Also, the word adventure, it has a very interesting use in that first conversation between Bilbo and Gandalf. Because when I would talk about a quest or something like that, or when I hear people talk about them, they would primarily use words like quest or journey or, I don't know, like trip. Like they don't usually refer to it as an adventure, because adventure often implies a bit more fun, I guess. But maybe that's because it just seems a bit meta to me that Gandalf is referring to it as an adventure, and also Bilbo responds in kind. And the funny thing is, Bilbo's complaint regarding adventures is they make you late for dinner. Okay. That's the most Hobbity thing I've ever heard in my life, and I love it. Also, what does Bilbo mean when he refers to the other lads and lasses who've gone off into the blue that Gandalf was involved in sending them on that adventures? Like, how many times has this happened, Gandalf? Like, do you just pop up in the Shire periodically and go, oh, I think that one could do with some travel. Here, I'm just gonna shove you out the door. Like, I can actually see Gandalf doing that. Really, I totally can. At least the Gandalf of this book. I'm not gonna talk about anything to do with Lord of the Rings in this book, or at least as little as I can, because we're reading those books next, and I don't want to give any spoilers away. But yeah, oh, Gandalf. I love him, but yeah, it is kind of funny watching him just kind of act like the well-intentioned, but at times a bit mischievous puppet master who doesn't have complete control, but has enough. Also, did Gandalf really just refer to Bilbo going off on an adventure as good for you and most amusing for me? Gandalf, you suck! I love you, but you suck! Oh, and a little fun fact. Thorin, one of his original names, was Gandalf. Now, I want to talk for a little bit about Bilbo's two sides to himself, the Took side and the Baggins side, because Tolkien uses these two family names to directly illustrate the two sides of Bilbo's personality. His Baggins side is the side that tends to get presented to the world. It is the side that he inherited from his father, Mungo Baggins. It is very respectable, very down to earth, very predictable. That's one thing that the hobbits tend to like about Baggins is a lot. And it definitely would never go on an adventure. The Tooks, by contrast, are pretty much the opposite of the Bagginses. They are very, very, very wealthy. They are possibly one of the richest families in the Shire, if not the richest. But they are not as respectable as the Bagginses. Although the Bagginses are decently wealthy, they are not on the Tooks level in that way. The Tooks are known for running off on adventures and just doing crazy, unpredictable things that people don't especially like. It's implied that Bilbo's mother, Belladonna, actually would do this as well before she married his father. And I'm not going to say what it is, but if you read into Lord of the Rings and some of the appendices, you hear some of the things that Tooks have done in the past, and yeah, they're an interesting group. And this, of course, creates a perfect metaphor for Tolkien to use in describing Bilbo's two halves. When we first meet him, his Baggins side is in full force. For a good chunk of the book, his Took side is in full force, although it takes some time for it to come out. But the Baggins side will occasionally resurface, and then at the end, the Baggins side kind of resurfaces when Bilbo's like, okay, I'm done, I need to go home. I am tired. Which, yeah, fair. I'd be tired too if I was on a journey across the world that included going up against a dragon for a year, basically. Journeying for a year, not going up against a dragon for a year. And unfortunately for poor Bilbo, his Baggins side, which is predominantly in control, does not go well with the dwarves when they first meet him. They basically spend the whole unexpected party just pushing every button they possibly can, some on purpose, some not. And I think it was good for Bilbo, ultimately, or at least the journey as a whole was, because it kind of helped him to realize things about himself he didn't otherwise know, and it helped him to kind of see outside the Shire. Also other things that continue on into the next book, but that's not going to be discussed here. The dwarves are super demanding in this scene. Gandalf is just as bad, and you can tell he's kind of enjoying it. And then you listen to the song Blunt the Knives, and just, oh my goodness, poor Bilbo, he's so freaked out. But of course, the dwarves are very careful with his dishes. They just sing a song about smashing them and doing everything they can possibly do to make it bad for him. Oh my goodness. But it comes across less as we're trying to, like, scare you, and more as, oh, let's just, you know, tease you / sing this song to get the work done. I don't know. Now, speaking of music, I just want to discuss Thorin's harp for a little bit. I don't want to say too much about it because it's such a tiny thing, but I find it interesting that Thorin is the only one of the dwarves listed as using a harp. Also, a harp is not an instrument you would normally associate with someone like Thorin, because he's very, very pompous. He doesn't really seem like someone who would have the patience to learn something like the harp. So seeing that he plays a harp, it almost feels like a callback to his royal heritage and the fact that he did grow up at court. He learned harp probably as a child, I would say, and has continued to use it throughout his life. And I really like that touch, because Thorin, like I said, he is pompous, but he is also well-intentioned. He loves his people dearly, and he does actually care about the right thing being done when he's not under the influence of dragon madness, sickness, greed, whatever you want to call it. That being said, at times he takes it a little bit too far and overestimates himself. Like, oh, my father was killed in the dungeons of the necromancer, let's go after him. Thorin? Sorry, Thorin, but if you went up against the necromancer, you would die. Very, very quickly. That's not an insult to you, it's just saying, it's the necromancer. Yeah, I don't know if it's a spoiler or not, so I'm not going to say it, but yeah, if you know who the necromancer is. One character I wanted to discuss here is Thranduil, the Elven King. So he's not actually given a name in this book, he's just called the Elf King, and he's the king of the Wood Elves in Mirkwood. But his name is Thranduil, we know that from other sources, and oh my goodness, he's way more likable than I remember. It's not like, oh my goodness, he's my favorite character, but he's actually really likable. Seeing the way he interacts with Bilbo, like, he has actually immense respect for Bilbo once he hears what Bilbo did. And he's the one who actually declares Bilbo elf friend, which I really, really like. It's enough that Bilbo actually chose to stay with Thranduil and his people during the Battle of the Five Armies, rather than going with, say, Bard or Dane's men. Because because ultimately, even if he had the highest chance of surviving with Thranduil, he also would rather defend Thranduil than the others if he had to choose between them. We also see that Thranduil is actually a very cunning leader. He may not do everything right, he isn't perfect, but you can tell he is actually pretty good at reading a situation and trying to deduce what's going on. He doesn't necessarily do it correctly, but sometimes that's because he just doesn't have all the information. And I do really like characters who show intelligence and cunning, which Thranduil definitely does. I'll probably discuss him more in a movie analysis version because I want to contrast him with his movie counterpart, played by Lee Pace, who I also love, but is actually a bit different. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here now because this video is getting really long, but if you have read The Hobbit, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Also, is there any topic in The Hobbit that you would like me to cover? As usual, I can't guarantee that I will actually cover it, but I would love to have suggestions. I would love to just have more stuff to talk to you guys about. It's fun doing this. So thanks for watching and have a wonderful day. See you later.